Live. Great. Good morning, everyone, or actually good evening. Sorry, I'm a little sleepy tonight, obviously. Welcome to Special Education Legal Fund's April webinar, in which we will be discussing post-secondary transition. My name is Christy Chandler, and I am the Executive Director and co-founder of Special Education Legal Fund. And I'm so pleased to welcome our distinguished panelists and our guests tonight for tonight's discussion. Before we start, Special Education Legal Fund is deeply thankful for the support of our corporate parent education program partners, Winston Preparatory School, American School for the Deaf, Chapel Haven Schleifer Center, Fusion Academy, the Pinnacle School, Spire School, Villa Maria School, and Hubbard Day School. Before we begin, I just wanted to share a couple words about Special Education Legal Fund for those of you who aren't familiar with us. Special Education Legal Fund, or SELF, was founded in 2018 to provide grants for families in need with children in the special education system. Since our founding, just over two and a half years ago, we have provided over $340,000 in grants for legal support from qualified special education attorneys to over 80 families in 35 school districts across Connecticut and Westchester County. For information about grants or to begin the application process, please send me an email at christine@spedlegalfund.org. I will put my email in the chat at the end of my introduction for anyone who is interested in the legal assistance program. Applications are reviewed on a monthly basis. The next deadline is April 19th, 2021. Families are eligible for this program if they have adjusted gross income of below 300% of the federal minimum poverty line, which is $76,400 for a family of 4 in Connecticut, have a child with a current IEP, and live in Connecticut or Westchester County. We are currently accepting applications from families in all school districts in those regions. And I'm really pleased this evening actually to announce a new program that we just launched a week ago. We've launched a program in April of 2021. It's a pilot, the Advocate Support Program, which will provide $1,000 in support for families in need with a student that has an IEP or a 504 plan and lives in Fairfield County, Connecticut. Grantee families will be eligible to receive support from an advocate on the approved Advocate Support Program list. For more information about that, you can email me as well, christine@spedlegalfund.org. We are getting to the webinar piece. We only have 2 more webinars this year. It's gone really, really quickly. On May 11th, we have the Summer Slide, ESY and Beyond, featuring a panel of special education attorneys. And on June 8th, we have the Year in Review, in which another panel of special education attorneys, including Andrew Feinstein, Courtney Spencer, Christina Gio, Adrian Arcontaki, and Michael Gilbert, will discuss what's happened on the legal front in Connecticut and Westchester and New York over the past year in special education. So if you're interested in that, please follow us on Facebook or Instagram at @SpedLegalFund. You can also sign up on Eventbrite. All of these events are free for all. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists for this evening. John Covett is our first panelist that I'm going to introduce this evening from Winston Transitions Program in New York City. I first met John a few years back when I was wearing a different nonprofit hat, and I was still trying to sort out, exactly what Special Education Legal Fund was going to be. And I was also exploring possibilities for my own son, who's currently 16 and kind of on the cusp of, what we would call transition. I was super impressed with John's program, what he's built at Winston Transitions. I've been pleased to watch it grow over the years, and I'm really excited to have him talk about it tonight. So welcome, John.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Christy Chandler. This is Christy's second appearance actually on our webinar series, and we're really excited to welcome her back. Christy's previously appeared on our Special Education Legal Fund panel to discuss the special education residential school setting, but she has expertise across a broad range of topics. And tonight she will present and speak about the Asperger Syndrome Adult Transition Program at Chapel Haven. So welcome, Christy. And finally, last but not least, we're super excited to welcome Lauren Macbeth this evening. Lauren and I go way back to almost 10 years, I guess, to 8 years or something like that, to her days as a focus instructor for my son at Winston Prep in Norwalk, Connecticut. And I, just as an aside, will say that he would not be where he is today without Lauren's support and the support of the entire team at Winston Prep in Norwalk. Since we know firsthand Lauren's skill and expertise with our kids, we were super excited to hear when she joined Westport College Prep, and we're excited to learn more about it tonight. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you, Christine.
Finally, this wouldn't be a webinar without a disclaimer. This webinar panel is presented for informational purposes only. This webinar is intended as a resource for families who are navigating the special education system in Connecticut or New York, and is not intended to provide legal support, advice, or assistance to any particular individual, nor is it intended to replace the advice and counsel of a qualified special education attorney. This webinar should not be construed as an endorsement by Special Education Legal Fund or any of its representatives of any of the participating panelists in this program. For webinar participants, thank you for joining us this evening. This panel should be viewed as a public forum. Please do not ask questions via the Zoom platform, either in the Q&A or the chat, about your child or your child's educational situation. Please email questions to christine@spedlegalfund.org. I will put that email in the chat so you have reference to it. In your question, please refrain from any comments that include identifiable information about your child, including their name, their grade, their school, or their school district. Please remember that your screen name may be visible to the participants in this panel, as well as panelists and Special Education Legal Fund. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and may be distributed or shown at a later date at the discretion of Special Education Legal Fund. So here we are, exploring post-secondary transition. John, you're up first. Just let me know when you want me to turn the slides.
Great. Thanks, Christine. Yeah, and I'm super excited to be here tonight, so thank you again. Yeah, we can move off to the first slide. So Winston Transitions is a part of the Winston Preparatory School. We are now, I think we're heading into our 10th year this coming fall of operation. We're, I think, going along with the mission and philosophy of Winston Prep. We are a highly individualized program. As it says here in our little mission statement, we're looking at the continued development of academic skills, employability, which I'll talk a little bit more about, obviously, and life in general. And the social emotional component of our program is really the underpinning of everything that we do. Move to the next one. Yeah. So one of the things that we look really closely at in regards to the growth and development of our students and their future is employability. Many of our students are going to go to college post our program. I think it's about 50% every year, give or take, depending on the size of the graduating class. But at the end of the day, or the end game for everyone, it's employment. So whether our students are going to college or not, they still have to be employable at the end of their college experience. I think a lot of people forget that a college diploma just doesn't necessarily translate to a job immediately. So creating those skills and those opportunities to continue or to develop the skills that don't exist necessarily for many of our students, or cultivate ones that might exist already. So we looked at a lot of different statistics in relationship to the need for employment skill building for any individual with a learning difference. As you can see from the data presented, there is a significant need there. In New York State, I think it's about 85% of individuals with any disability are underemployed, meaning they're not doing jobs that that they could or should be doing. So making a shift in that is a really big mission of ours within our program. So who are Winston students? I think this is a little complicated, or who are transition students. We work with a really wide range of learning profiles. Typically looking at this neuropsychological paradigm, language processing, nonverbal processing, executive functioning, and the overlap of each one of those domains is clear and present for probably 98% of our students at any given time, 99%. But again, we're looking at students that need greater independence before entering the workforce or their lives in general or higher education. And again, as I said before, the need for social emotional growth and development. So the core components, so when we think about our program, we're really looking at it often as 3 buckets that we want to fill with students as they're coming in. Again, looking at the academic piece of it, because that's extremely important, whether they're going to college or not. Foundational skills from a practical application approach from an academic standpoint are still extremely important. So comprehension, problem solving, again, executive functioning being a mainstay for so many of our students in an area of difficulty. And again, rounding it all out with a strong ability to communicate effectively. Without that ability to communicate, a lot of these other factors don't support themselves without that. So that's an important piece of that. The internship program really supports our employability skill building. We're providing our students with opportunities from an immersion-based standpoint. So when I say that, I mean that our students are in the same internship for the entire school year. They are doing 10 hours a week, and they're there very independently. And we're really kind of the operating cog in the wheel behind the scenes with heavy communication with our internship providers. And we're also doing a lot of upfront training for lay people that are out there running their businesses on the effective ways to work with our students and provide effective opportunities and again provide them with skills that they need to be successful in the workplace. So initiative and leadership, teamwork, planning, organizing, communication, again, problem solving, critical thinking, self-management, and the willingness to learn, which is extremely important. And then for our focus program, which is our one-to-one programming, and that's throughout all of Winston campuses. In our program, it's slightly different. We're focusing more on goal setting, problem solving, and future planning. And we're doing a lot of coaching within that model as well. There's not a tremendous amount of academic support unless it's a great area of need, but focus always supports the greatest area of need. Within that and throughout the entire program, working in concert is what we call our qualities of a sustainable and independent learner. And that is something that was created along with the National School Climate Center. It's qualitative and quantitative. We use it as a formalized rating scale. And for us at Transition, since we're not a graded program, we don't place our students in grades. And we don't grade our students numerically or letter grades. We're driven purely by feedback and consistent and clear and direct feedback, and using the qualities of a sustainable and independent learner. So the idea of resiliency, social responsibility, self-advocacy, self-regulation, self-reflection, social communication skills, problem-solving, management, and organization are all essential skills, not only for higher education, for independent life, but extremely important for the world of employment and being a viable candidate for employment.
And that's it, I think.
All right. Yep,
right?
that was it.
Perfect. I love hearing about the QSOL, John. Takes me right back. Christy, you're up, Chapel Haven.
All right, thank you. You can go to the first slide. So Chapel Haven has not that slide though, I would say. Christine, I think I might have.
You know what, that was one of ours.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's why
That's
you're
okay.
looking at me.
I thought it ended kind of abruptly. I forgot we had a couple of.
Yeah, do you want to do that?
Sorry, Christine.
The
okay, go ahead.
webinar without some kind of minor crisis. That's what you were looking at.
These are some of our outcomes. And
Sorry.
I'll go through this quickly, not to take up anybody else's time. As I said before, 47, 50%, depending on the year, of our students are going to go off to higher education, and all different types of schools, from LD specific colleges to colleges that have LD support, or mainstream colleges. We've seen about 3% needing additional transition programs, sometimes boarding, or sometimes programs that need, that will align with a greater support around mental health issues if they arise during our time with a student. Some of our students will stay on with our support program, which is a program that we have in place for after the program, where you can meet with one of your teachers, typically a focus teacher, one-on-one, for any type of support, from life, from coaching to employment support and higher education support. We've had about 5% get hired from internships over the years, which is pretty cool. We lose those internships, unfortunately, when that happens, but that's a great outcome. And then 5% equals up about, students that we don't really have a good track on at this point. And then employment, we're looking at about 29 to 30% are gainfully employed after the program if they're not going to college.
Great.
That wraps me up, I think.
All right, thank you. Sorry. I will definitely fix that for the distribution of the slide presentation. Sorry, Christy, I hope this is the right slide. Are we good?
Yeah, we're on track, so no worries. So Chapel Haven has been in the Westville area since the early 70s. We actually started down on Chapel Street in New Haven, which was how we got our name. The adults decided to pair Chapel Street with New Haven to make Chapel Haven. We do get that question a lot. But then we moved to the Westville neighborhood in 1976, and we've been there ever since. And so it's really a place where a variety of young adults can come to learn all the pieces that they need to be a successful young adult, an independent young adult, while having a really thriving and supportive community, both for learning and then for long-term living as well. So we are an accredited program, and we also are an approved special education school in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and have been in New Jersey as well. So as Christine mentioned earlier, we do have a couple of different transition programs. Our REACH program is one that we talked about previously, but just a brief mention that it serves young adults who have mild intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so a really concrete approach to helping them learn all the nuts and bolts that will help them transition into independent living for the long term. And then tonight we're going to be focusing on our ASAP program, which stands for Asperger Syndrome Adult Transition Program. And actually, yeah, Christine, you can switch to the next slide there. So this program began back in 2006. And so really was created out of a response to meet the very specific needs of adults who at that time, Asperger was the diagnosis. And so really what we did was work with experts in the field, the Yale Child Study Center, Michelle Garcia-Winter, to help us develop a curriculum that would really address those social communication deficits, in addition to the executive functioning needs, the independent living skills, and the supports that they would need to be successful in the college setting and developing those vocational skills. And so in the beginning, the program was initially kind of modeled after the success that we'd had with the REACH program. It was a 2-year curriculum. It had a curriculum-based assessment, that everybody kind of progressed through. It was very comprehensive, both in terms of the programming and the scheduling, as well as with the tuition. And then as we progressed through the years, what we were finding is that there were some adults who didn't always need that level of intensity for a 2-year period and didn't need that kind of full-time programming. And so back in about 2017, we decided to kind of unbundle the pieces of that program to make it a more flexible and customizable option for adults. So we started having adults that were coming to us, in their 30s, in their early 40s even, maybe having graduated with 2 master's degrees, but not having the pieces they needed to successfully launch into that final step of, true adult independent living. And so that's been really successful. So the program now, and you can switch to the next slide there, Christine, please. The program now, really allows for, just what I said, it allows it to be very flexible and customizable. So, most high school students, 18 years old, coming right out of high school, haven't had a whole lot of independent living experiences. Yeah, they definitely still tend to benefit from, about a 2-year time limit, or program time, with full-time programming, Monday through Friday from 9 to 3, having that intensity. But then, as I said before, we have adults who maybe have already graduated from college or are successfully working part-time and are just looking to fill in a couple of pieces. And so there are opportunities for them on our campus as well. The great thing about Chapel Haven too is that it's not just a place where you come and you learn and you live for a short period of time, but it's also a place that offers lifelong supported options for long-term independent living. And so we do have a large percentage of our graduates that even after they've, mastered the skills with us, they're ready to move off campus and live independently out in the community. They continue to have a few hours of weekly supports from us to help them maintain that independence for the long term. And whatever that, ongoing need is for them, whether that's making sure that the bills are paid or that they're maintaining success, in the workplace, it's, a la carte options that are tailored to their needs. And we do believe in lifelong learning. And so we continue to set goals with our graduates and help them to monitor the progress with that as well. So you can kind of see there some of the core curriculum components. I think one of the things that makes us a unique program is that it really is a holistic approach, to everything that you're going to need to be a successful young adult. So as I mentioned before, social communication is a huge piece of what we're working on, those executive functioning skills, self-determination, helping our adults figure out what they want to do and, the steps that they need to be able to get there. And in that piece, I would say that's really kind of the crux for a lot of our young adults, is helping them to understand the why this all matters. These are very capable young adults who can learn things pretty quickly, but helping them connect to why I should do these things that maybe I'm not super motivated to do, like how that's going to impact the short-term and long-term goals I have for myself and the relationships that I'm having with people who are going to help me to get those goals accomplished. There is a really active recreation component piece in there. College attendance is not a requirement in the program, but we do have a significant number of students, and this varies from year to year depending on, the incoming class that we have. But we do have a significant number of students that are taking college classes, some slowly, 1 or 2 classes at a time. Others, we do have, full-time college students in the areas that work with us for some one-to-one support, some coaching, and maybe some social communication support. So that's a nice piece that we can offer to local college students. I talked about the end of the graduation piece. I think that might be my last slide. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Christy. Lauren, you're up.
Thank you, Christine. I'm Lauren Macbeth. I'm the Executive Director of Westport College Prep. You may actually go to the next slide. We are a neurodiverse post-secondary program located in Wilton, Connecticut. We are currently in our 2nd year, so we are the newest program. I'm very grateful to be here tonight. I'm very excited to share that we are launching an online program called WCP Live this coming fall. So we offer both in-person and online programming. Our students are neurodiverse. They are 18 to 22, high school graduates or diploma eligible. Our goal is to build academic, social, and career readiness skills. Some of the classes we offer for our in-person classes, we have English, seminar and wellness, civics, which is a new class for next year, communication, personal finance, intro to sociology. We really want our students to have an exposure to college material, syllabus, lecture notes, while building that communication skills, executive function. We use Google Classroom, so all of our students access assignments online. It is incredibly engaging instruction, whether we are virtual or in person. We follow the same schedule. Our weekly service learning, this is a huge part of our mission and our philosophy. It's woven into everything we do. We want our students every week on Fridays to learn about local organizations while building communication skills, how to email, how to call a program and reach out. It's an ongoing process and it happens every Friday. And it's also a half-day Friday, so that's always very exciting for our students. Our internships, we work with local organizations and programs. This number is growing, but we have about 12 local organizations in Wilton and Norwalk here in Connecticut. Really, ideally, we're teaching our students those college readiness skills. It's a supportive process, so our students are there for the full semester or the full year. It's student-centered. So for example, if they're interested in working with children, they'd be at a preschool location. We want our students to feel successful while also kind of brainstorming and working on those both hard and soft skills, which can be a challenge for many of our students. Dual enrollment with Landmark College. This is very exciting part of our program. Our students can earn up to 6 college credits and they have 12 online classes. They utilize Canva. So we are the liaison and our students are accessing the curriculum, but also we're supporting them with, feedback to understanding instructor feedback. Everything is in the moment with Canva, so it's time stamped and our students are able to review that feedback with our support. I mentioned WCP Live. This is very exciting. We are launching this in fall of 2021. We have a virtual cohort of students, which will include one-to-one academic coaching, weekly cohort meetups, academic classes, and Landmark. And then our social skills and related services. So we have some new exciting programming with the Hangout Spot, which is all included in our tuition. It's a wraparound social service. It's been requested and we heard our parent feedback and we find that incredibly valuable. We will also include college and transition services, academic and life skills coaching as add-on services. This is all on our website, westportcollegeprep.org. You may go to the next slide, Christine. So our summer program, I love this picture. Our summer program is from 9 to 1. We start this June 28th and it goes to July 23rd. So this is daytime instruction. We are currently enrolling rising juniors and seniors, recent high school grads, current college students. This is all about academic and social skill building. We will include reading comprehension. We'll have an English class, while also working on those self-advocacy skills, note-taking, executive function strategies, study skills, all of those important skills and strategies. And we've added a movement, yoga, and expressive art to this summer, so that's new. Admissions should be the next slide. Okay, so our admissions process, we have a rolling admission. Students may join for the semester or the full-time program. We are incredibly flexible. We follow a college calendar. So our program is September to May. And we, as I mentioned, offer online summer programming as well. To learn more about our admissions process, we are giving in-person tours now as of March 1st, which is very exciting. We continue to do monthly virtual open houses. So you can get on our mailing list and join us for our virtual open houses. And my contact information is there as well. So feel free to email if you have any questions or would like to come visit.
Great, thank you. And just as a, I'll mention for the participants in the webinar, I will be providing this, this slide presentation to everyone who's attended or registered for the webinar after the session is over, probably tomorrow morning. So all of the contact information that is available in the slide presentation will be available at that time. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. There's so many, all these webinars were really started because I wanted to know things, essentially. I had questions and I wanted to bring together a panel of experts to ask those questions. So they were really, quite selfish initially. There's no other topic that was more personal or more interesting to me than this one, really. This, this post-secondary transition program, and how a parent evaluates a program and thinks about that and what their student is going to get from a program and whether their student needs that program and how do they differ, district to, private programs or whatever. So I'm going to start this out and, maybe with John, and then we'll go to Christy, and then we'll go to Lauren. You kind of answered this, in your presentation, but, what kind of student thrives in your program? Like, what's the type of student that you're looking for when you have a student come in to see you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, it's, we have a really wide, as I said before, a very wide range of learning profiles. We have students that will fall in the lower cognitive range. And then we have students that are way up in the superior range and everything in between in regards to their level of academic functioning, how they're maneuvering and functioning in their everyday lives as human beings. And then, their what their future prospects look like and what current skills they have from an employment standpoint. But that social emotional piece is really something that we look at very much so when we're going through the admissions process. Obviously we use what's called the continuous feedback process, and I don't know if I'm sure Lauren remembers that.
I remember the continuous feedback process. I
right.
remember well.
So,
I remember that the feedback wasn't necessarily the same. The students' feedback was often quite different from the
right.
parents' feedback. I remember that.
Right. I think that's a whole nother conversation and relationship to, or another question probably of, somebody's awareness.
Yes.
Right. And one of the things that, and to kind of tap on that, to touch on that a little bit, in regards to what we're looking for when we're going through the admissions process, willingness, openness, which doesn't always exist. The buy-in is extremely important, but sometimes we know that that's not going to be there always, and have to, work towards that with the student. So that's not a reason not to take somebody. But, I think looking at it from an individual perspective is really the answer. It's not one type of student. It's not one person who thrives. The people who thrive the most in the program are the ones who deeply connect to what's happening. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't always happen in the same time frame for each student when they come into the program. So everything that we have to do in relationship to responding to the students' needs has to be on a minute-to-minute, moment-to-moment basis, right? And it has to be reflective of the greatest area of need at any given point in time. And it's not always just about academic performance, and it's not always just about social emotional or how they're doing in their internship. It's often, just something that arises in any given moment that if that's not managed and worked on, then the other things aren't going to connect. And they're not going to come to fruition the way they need to so that they're successful in their life. So that's really how we kind of look at it. It's probably a really long answer to your question.
That's all right.
But I think it's that was
it's
the best answer I can give you.
Christy, how about you? What are your thoughts on the type of student that thrives in your program and what you're looking for?
Yeah, so even though our name is Asperger Syndrome Adult Transition Program, you don't have to have an Asperger or even an autism diagnosis. So we do serve, related social communication disorders, students with nonverbal learning disabilities. I think the students that really connect with our programming are the ones who just need some help, like breaking down those implicit expectations that we're expected to learn along and along by watching our peers and by interacting with our coworkers and getting feedback from our family. That's really hard for our adults, and so they really benefit from having that made more explicit, so that they know what that hidden etiquette is, across all those different settings. John talked a little bit about the motivation and the buy-in. That definitely is an important piece. I mean, we often see young adults who are anxious and maybe like the 100% buy-in isn't there, but they know they want to be independent and they want to move forward from where they are right now. And so that's an important piece that we're looking for, because obviously these are young adults, and we're not a therapeutic residential program. So if you don't want to be there, no one's going to force you to be there, so there has to at least be the piece where they're like, okay, I'm willing to give this a shot. I'm willing to work and, take some steps forward, a couple steps back, more steps forward. I think in terms of this goes along with the anxiety piece too, often seeing young adults who have comorbid diagnoses, just making sure that it's the the learning differences and the autism and the social communication deficits and those things that's leading the cart, rather than it being a primary mental health need, because that's a little less where our expertise is.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, young adults that, as I mentioned before, the great thing about the program is it is flexible in the programming and meeting the needs of adults at different stages on their journey to independence. So whether you're, somebody right out of high school, or whether you've graduated from college, or maybe you're even working and just still hitting a couple of roadblocks, there's definitely options for you.
Great. Lauren?
I would also second the motivation and the buy-in. When our students come in to interview, you can tell really quickly if they're excited to be here. Parents will make the call, and we'll speak to parents, and they're thrilled. And then, some students are like, this isn't for me. And I appreciate those conversations. I think that, there does need to be that buy-in. They do have to be intrinsically motivated to work on these skills and have hard conversations, accept feedback. But ideally our students are working towards that independence. Some may have a goal to transition to a residential program, and they really want to have a dorm and have a roommate, and we want to get them there. But we also want to have tough conversations with our students and speak specifically to what goals they need to target first. But they do need to have that motivation and that buy-in for post-secondary. For Westport College Prep, our students are either coming to us right out of high school, or we've had some students come and visit and apply who have completed, a semester at a local college, and they're living at home for a year, and they need to build, college readiness skills. So we have both, but I think, the motivation is huge.
Absolutely. I actually have a question from the audience. For each of you, each of the panelists, are there specific experiences or types of programs that you feel have been especially helpful for the transition students that you've seen enter your programs prior to entering your program? Basically, the question is, what do you wish all of your students had done or experienced prior to beginning your program? John, you want to go?
I get to go
I'll
first.
mix it up.
Time.
You know what? I promise I'll mix it up. I won't
It's really cool. That's a great question. I'm in all transparency, even students coming from our own programming, and we've had students come from several of our campuses. I think the nature of what we're doing is completely different than what they were experiencing in high school. Even for our students that are technically still in high school, like still might be seniors with us. I think it's not so much about like their overall readiness or preparation for the program. It's kind of what we have to get in there and start doing with them once we get them. And a lot of times, and this is nothing against, there's wonderful, wonderful programs out there. But I think, again, we're looking at this new chapter in somebody's life. And most of that, the beginning of that story, was not even touched upon in their previous years, because the focus was very different. It was more academic driven. It was getting to graduation. It was, is college the next step, but not really thinking about the larger picture. And again, not to anybody's fault, just so that that's kind of the framework of education. When I think about students coming from all different types of programs, and we have kids coming out of public schools coming to our program, all different types of private schools throughout the city and the tri-state area, we see often that we have to kind of start from scratch in a lot of cases, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that we're looking at this new, like I said before, chapter or story that needs to be written, and the pages aren't necessarily there. I know that was very metaphorical.
No, it's I mean, a lot of this is very is going to be very individual for the for the particular student, and and it's interesting that you all, and we can kind of go into this later, but it's interesting that like sometimes your students will graduate to another type of transition program,
Right.
or, be in, what I like about all of your programs is that, there's that element of flexibility where, there's the scaffolding that you can sort of peel away as it's, as it becomes necessary and proper. So, I mean, I think that's, that's, tremendous. Lauren, do you want to?
I think just one other thought on that. Sorry, Lauren, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just, I think, maybe the integration of some practicality in academics prior to could be, I mean, that's something I think about often for high school students, getting more of those life oriented types of coursework, financial literacy, things like that, that could really benefit them in the long term, especially for anybody with a learning difference, and might not ever be able to get through algebra in their life.
Right.
But having that foundation, having that,
but might need to learn how to balance a checkbook.
But most definitely will have to learn how to balance an
exactly.
online bank account and manage their money, and
exactly.
Even dabble in the stock market and understand what they're doing when they face their taxes. So
for sure.
And I mean, there's so many layers to it. So
Lauren, you want to go next?
And I think I would just add to that. Sure. Yeah, I think to just add to that, having conversations with your children early, before their junior year, having conversations about transition and about potential programs that they may be interested in. We've had students reach out to us that are, juniors, and they're like, we're interested in your program. And that's very exciting, number one, but two, that they're open to a gap year or a transition program versus a traditional college program. And so kind of starting to think about what programs might be a good fit, or visiting those programs and having those conversations, with your dean at school or guidance counselor, and just as a family, because I think that that's, we talk about the motivation, we talk about the buy-in for a post-secondary program. Their peers may be going off to another program, and just knowing that your path is different, and having those honest conversations.
Absolutely. Christy? What do you wish to do before they got to you?
Yeah. So thinking about especially our residential program, like we love it whenever young adults or, teens have had the opportunity to have some away from home experiences. So whether that's, summer camp or, other kinds of opportunities, that's really fantastic, because then they're in a setting where they're having to take feedback from somebody else. They're starting to take on a little bit more responsibility. We also really are appreciative, and it goes definitely to the readiness level when families have started transferring more responsibilities to their students at home, not waking them up in the morning, but teaching them to get up with an alarm clock, and not pouring their cereal for them, but letting them do that on their own. And, sometimes these things just happen because you're moms and dads and you love your kids, and you're, doing sweet things for them.
It's just easier. It's just easier to do it.
Or
to make them do it. And less messy.
Starting to think, and then starting to think about, though, okay, wait, like if I keep doing this, what is that going to do for their ability? Because we don't want it to feel like they're jumping off of a cliff, right? We want it to feel like it's like a smooth, gradual sort of transition. And so looking at ways to start building in some of those daily responsibilities and expectations while they're still in the comfort of home is really positive and powerful.
Perfect. I wanted to ask you guys, specific to your program, do you have a specific skill that you're thinking about with your program that students acquire during their time with you? I remember, when I went to visit Winston Transitions, and I actually sat in on a class where I didn't sit in, but I was standing at the door, a class where they were learning how to make appointments. It was a doctor's appointment class or whatever. And I thought that was great. I thought that was tremendous. I know plenty of kids that are in their 20s that don't make their doctor's appointments, neurotypical kids. So what is something in your program specifically that, like a specific special thing that, you focus on in your program that the students take away that maybe they don't learn, that's unique to you, that they don't learn anywhere else? John, I promise this is the last time you're going to go first.
That's fair. You used me as the example.
I did. I used you the example.
So yeah, I mean, that's certainly one, making doctor's appointments. Something that we've been doing recently in the especially when we went to we had to go to distance learning and kind of revamp all of our employability, skill building, and all of that. One of the things that we've been doing is email writing and
Yes.
responding.
Yeah.
So it's not even so much about writing an email.
Right.
It's also about how do you respond to a continuous thread
Right.
of
How
email
many
conversation.
times should you respond to the same email if they haven't responded to
Right.
you yet?
Sure, right. You know,
Right.
and the appropriateness of how you're addressing the person,
Right.
all of that. I mean, we go into significant interview prepping where we bring a lot of different individuals from all industries
Mhm.
to come into our space. We're actually planning a virtual one. We did a virtual one back in March of last year. It was incredible. We had a larger turnout virtually than we did in person, which always,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And that was incredible. We're going to be doing another one coming up in May. We typically do it 2 times a year. This year was a little different, obviously. But that's a great scale. I think overall communication, right? I talked about communication in the presentation. The ability to communicate opens up so many doors. It allows for greater advocacy. It allows for greater self-reflection and networking and connecting with people.
Yeah.
And again, it really opens up that avenue for feedback, and how to appropriately respond to it. So, I mean, there's a lot of answers to that question for sure.
Absolutely. Christy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, and I just wanted to tag on to what John was saying before I kind of get into our more specifics that, with the job piece, like a lot of our adults, they can get a job relatively easily, but they can't keep a job because of the deficits in that communication piece. They don't know when to stop talking about the game that they were playing over the weekend with their coworkers and get back on task, with what they're supposed to be doing, or how to watch those nonverbal signals that they're giving their boss whenever they're taking the feedback, those are big deals. So yeah, that's a super important point. So I think for us, the things, there's a lot of fantastic programs out there, and a lot of them help with supporting college and at least moving them in the right direction with vocational skills, even though there's different approaches for that. I think our social communication curriculum, is really one of the things that makes us unique because we do such a deep dive with it. And for the reason I was just talking about with the vocational point, and we actually have done some pre and post testing and analyzed our data from 2 years worth of programming and found that adults had made like 39 months worth of gains in their expressive communication in that 2-year period. I think the other piece is the independent living skills, especially our day students get a really comprehensive independent living skills piece as well, but especially our students who are living there. I mean, you really are doing it all, with supports in the beginning and then that being faded, but we're not a college setting, that we're not in dorms. There's not a dining hall where you're going to go and have your meals prepared for you. You're really working and learning to maintain your apartment every day. What happens when you don't do your dirty dishes and your roommate gets upset with you?
Right.
Having to menu plan, do all your grocery shopping, make sure that's fitting within your budget, setting aside time to make sure that you're making something that it's at least decently nutritional, and so it, our young adults then come away being able to do that. Our grads on average only get about 2.5 hours a week of one-to-one supports. And so after, that time learning in that very structured way, as you said, kind of peeling back the scaffolding as it's no longer needed, they're ready for that.
Perfect. Lauren?
I think I would say, these are all great ideas, but to piggyback on a few, just awareness of schedule. I love Google Calendar. I want our students to, when I or another teacher kind of adds that there's an exam coming up, or that they need to have a check-in with their teacher, or that they have landmark open office hours, just awareness of schedule and ability to kind of, I love that Google Calendar syncs to students' phones. So, I'm putting a reminder on Google Calendar, they're accepting, and then it also gives them the reminder. So lots of reminders and awareness of just their weekly schedule, what appointments they have. They have their standing appointment with their therapist every Wednesday, for example. But what time is it? How long does it typically go? And are you working on anything that you need to prepare? And just awareness of
how long does it take to get there?
Right. How long?
Mhm.
Yeah. When should you start getting ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like we said, setting an alarm for yourself, refilling your prescriptions, just awareness of, personal needs and schedule and safety. And, I think a lot of that can come with just, Google Calendar and technology and reminders. So we want to give our students access to that.
I think it's interesting to see, because as we think about like moving a child, a student, I shouldn't say child, a young adult from, the environment of high school to whatever environment exists after high school, whether it be college or, employment or whatever it is. I think one of the biggest challenges, and I'm interested to hear how you all deal, kind of manage this transition, is how you move from this very structured high school calendar where you're like, you're in class from 8 o'clock until 4 o'clock. And then you come home and then, you eat dinner and you do your work or whatever, and then you go to bed, to a college type schedule where there's a lot more flexibility. There's a lot less instructional time. There's a lot more downtime. And in my experience, that like excessive free time is not necessarily like, at least my kid's friend, in terms of like, how do you get them to do the things they have to do to, motivate them to do things that are maybe not as preferred as opposed to, more preferred, and how do you keep them from, playing video games for, all the time that they don't have, the instructional period. So I'm just interested in how you guys, kind of manage that transition. John, it's not your turn. Christy, why don't you go first?
Sure. So, yeah, I think often young adults are coming our way because that piece is such a struggle for them. And some of them have gone to college and unfortunately had that failure where they just couldn't manage all those expectations at once, and learn how to utilize that time effectively. And so, in the beginning, we are there to put that additional structure in place. Our students do have a schedule that they follow. It's not jam-packed, from morning until night, but depending on the young adult, we may be adding in explicitly some of those things that we think everybody should just be doing, like here's the time when you need to take your shower, and here's when you need to prepare your breakfast, and here's when you need to be working on your homework from your college class that you attended on Monday, and you don't meet again until the following Monday. So that's definitely an important piece. And that looks a little bit different for everybody, because some of our students that is not too terribly hard for them, and it's sometimes helping them to connect. Well, it's often helping them to connect the real world consequences to scheduling snafus as well, So yeah, you stayed up and you played video games all night long and you had an interview at 8:30 the next morning and that didn't go so well. So, what do we need? How can we learn from that? And how can we use that to help you going forward? Because you definitely are adults. So we want
those are important things to learn, that those things where
exactly.
you kind of fail up, for want of a better word,
Exactly.
do something and then you have a consequence of having given into that, to that impulse, that you had, so those are good learning experiences too, which unfortunately, for whatever, for all the reasons that we've discussed, don't happen as well in the home environment,
Right.
So, that's, we can segue into that discussion next after we kind of, that's sort of like the residential versus the day program piece and how like a parent should evaluate that. But, don't let me cut you off. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah. You put a good point on kind of where I was going there. And I was just going to say, I think that speaks to the self-determination piece of things too. So, yeah.
Perfect. Lauren, you want to go next?
Sure. I would say starting to peel back the layers, like allowing our students to have that structure when they first come. And obviously we want our students to have structure, but kind of we'll have weekly communications with families, but then maybe for, year two, our students may be with us, 2-3 years. year 2 is going to look very different, than year 1. And so we want to have those reflective conversations with our students and with our families. And, for example, a landmark class, your assignments due on Friday, but we want part of your schedule and part of your calendar, to include those nightly readings and clicking turn in and submit. So, there's a lot of gray area when it comes to the schedule, and just increasing our students' awareness of what that means in terms of time management, task initiation, but ideally kind of peeling back that support, throughout the program.
John?
Yeah, I think, to Christy's point, our students are with us because they're not ready for that environment yet, right? So, and thinking about that from a growth mindset type of perspective, right? Yet is the optimal word. Doesn't mean they're not going to be ready at some point. They're just not there yet. So the way that we've designed the program is to be very structured and supportive, but with this idea that we're going to be pulling away that as often and ultimately very much so as we're going through the program. So, with thinking about the program in more typical times, obviously too, students are in one day for academic and social emotional growth and development, then they're out for a full day at their internship, then they're back in again for the coursework and working on all the skills, and then they're back out again at their internship, and then they're back in again. So there's that kind of very fluid in-out model to begin with. And we've been running that model very successfully from day one, really. And then just the kind of organic fluidness throughout the day. We're not as rigid as high school, but we're also not as widespread as a college schedule might be, where you have a class at 8 o'clock in the morning and not another one until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And what do I do with all that time in between? And for our kids, that can be really disastrous, right? You can fall into a giant hole of video games and whatever else might be going on, and not remember where they need to be. So for us, we also have, I didn't mention it in my presentation, but we have a long-standing relationship with Landmark, the same dual enrollment program. And our students do that work independently outside of our program. But we have a support person on staff on our team who works with the students. So that is an example where a student might not be in their literacy class because they're meeting with Raul to work on executive functioning skills around their Landmark coursework. Or our focus program, which is very different than Winston proper, is not on the schedule. It's not a 45-minute block every day. Our students meet typically 2 days a week with their focus instructor, sometimes 3, sometimes more, depending on what's going on. So there's a lot of fluidness to that. And they're also learning to schedule with their focus teacher, as if they were making an appointment with their with the provider, right? So with their support person. And again, we don't do that immediately because it would be disastrous if our kids aren't ready for it. So we gradually build them up to that. And I use failing up all the time. The natural consequences of life are real. You don't show up someplace, you lose an opportunity. You don't show up to a job, somebody's waiting online for that job. If you miss coursework at college, you're going to fail that class, and no professor is going to come looking for you to go, Johnny, why didn't you do your work? Right?
That's an interesting thing. Like they never, it's like in college, no one is checking in on you to make sure that you go to class. They don't care if you go to class. Like that's on you. So that's definitely
and if you fail out,
thing. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I think the other point, the other lens that we look through, and I'm a parent myself I have twin boys that are 18. One needs support. The other one is neurotypical. And so I have one son with learning differences. I also have a younger daughter who has some learning challenges as well. So 2 out of my 3 kids have some learning differences. So understand it so well as a parent, especially now as a parent of that age frame of where they're emerging into adulthood, and the challenges that exist in that. I think the important thing that we really look at in regards to the support of our parents, and to me that's extremely important, is that this is the last chance that our families are going to get. Most often, this kind of connection to their child's experience. After this, whether it's college, employment, they're never going to know anything. Right. They're only going to know what their child wants to tell them. Right. And usually that's not much. you know, and hopefully that gets better as they get older and we have different relationships with our kids, right? But, you know, this is that final piece in this puzzle of connectivity and really getting, you know, some insight into what's happening and the reasons why it could impact them and the things that they need to do to be successful. Again, we want to pull back on that. We also want our families to know that we're doing the heavy lifting and they don't have to do as much as they were doing. And Christine, you said it before, it doesn't translate at home well. And I think, you know, I would imagine many of the people on this webinar are parents, you know, obviously, and know that the conversation that we try to have with our parents is often done much better by someone else, you know, and that's something that I think all of our programs offer is that opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Lauren, I think that's you, or are you up now?
Yes. Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I mean, I think that, you know, awareness of our students, like the communication piece is huge. Awareness of schedule is huge. And I think, you know, just being more like perspective taking, right? Understanding cause and effect, like what you said, John, you know, nobody is going to track you down when you don't show up for class. So, and our schedule too allows, like, similarly, like it is really structured and our students are here for their 3 classes, and then they're off in their internships. And, you know, we want to continue to have those conversations and about what's, you know, what was hard for you today, or, you know, I noticed this in class. And if it's within the internship, you know, are you struggling with kind of the social dynamic and navigating that? So I think, you know, having those conversations kind of throughout the program, because, you know, especially we want our parents to feel involved. We want our parents to be part of those conversations, you know, especially now, but ideally kind of giving our students the tools to have those, you know, conversations with their families.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask, you know, this is sort of a, a follow on, you know, can you talk a little bit about each of your programs and the sort of recreational and social aspect of it? You know, particularly because that's an area where, you know, I know that, you know, our kids, you know, sometimes struggle a little bit, is, you know, how to make connections and how to, you know, have that, you know, that social experience as well. You know, Lauren, you know, maybe you want to start with this. I know that, you know, like my experience with you is that, you know, you have great experience and knowledge of how to foster, you know, social experience between students and create a community with your work at Winston Prep as Dean of Student Life. So maybe you could talk about how Westport College Prep does that. I realize it's difficult now, given, you know, the current environment, but, you know, maybe let's take a before and after, you know, angle on that. You know, what does it look like, you know, in an ideal world, and then what has it been looking like in, you know, this sort of more restricted world?
Sure. I think in terms of like building community, it would be our service learning program. Ideally, our students are, you know, out in the community on Fridays at a local food pantry or clothing donation center, Habitat for Humanity. You know, we had this long list of programs that we would be working with on Fridays, and obviously paused that for virtual programming last year. Now on Fridays, we are together on campus, researching local programs, giving back to the community. We've done Toys for Tots. We actually are doing an Earth Day project. So kind of researching local organizations and working together, but building community, I think, you know, that happens every day. And we want our students to feel part of the community, you know, whether they are, we did a flower arranging project a couple weeks ago, and they were, you know, passing out throughout the building. You know, so I feel very fortunate that we can have, you know, in-person programming. We're small, we are growing, you know, we have, you know, 2 student cohorts for next year, but for this year we have 1 student group. And So I think that, building community happens on day-to-day activities and, getting to know one another. I'm really excited about the hangout spot, social programming, kind of wraparound support that we'll be offering. We're starting it this summer with weekly social groups. We also started virtual young adult meetups, which are so much fun. We started with, I think, 4 students, and then last month we had, I believe, 9. And so it's open to all.
Do they have a theme, or how does that?
Yeah, so we did. Someone just said the hangout spot is great. I agree. We did music bingo, which was a huge hit. We're going to do bring your own dinner next. We're going to have a movie night. So they'll all have a theme, but they're open to, young adults. It's virtual. So at neurodiverse 18 to 22-year-olds, everybody's welcome. So we, do getting to know you games, but I think it's part of kind of communication and social skills are really hard for our students. And this past year plus has been really hard. So we really just
hard for me now. Like, I'm like, I don't even know. I mean, I definitely am like, I don't know if I can, go to a party,
re-enter that.
More than 4 people. Yeah. I mean, it's, there's just some significant.
Agreed. So our goal is to kind of have the virtual hangouts, but then this summer we'll be doing some in person, getting to know young adults in the area. I think that our kids feel really isolated, and
being part of the
COVID has
program is great. The fact that they're into, because that's obviously what we want, is that we want, to be integrated into the community in the way that, everyone is integrated in the community through the work, through volunteer work, through going to the store, through working out, through all of those different pieces of it, and not to be just, kind of doing things by ourselves, in our
right.
group.
And I think that's also just one quick piece, and I know Christy and John probably can add to this. Our local internships are local to this area in Connecticut, and ideally they'll become a paid internship, and maybe they'll want to, stay on as a paid position, and they'll get promoted ideally. So, we want it to be they're building relationships local to Fairfield County, White Plains, New York. And, that is our goal, is for our students to feel connected to the community, continue to build their social awareness and perspective taking.
Wonderful.
And just, initiate. And that's like my word.
Absolutely. Christy, why don't you talk a little bit about, because I know your, kind of social recreational program is tremendous.
Yeah, so so the Reach side of things has a fantastic recreation program as well, both online and in person. Right now, the in-person is on pause, but if there's anybody out there who really is just looking to add some fun, like really well facilitated activities, I highly recommend it. But the ASAP program, we're fortunate that our residential students have been able to continue doing in-person social activities. It has made it not be as much out in the community as it typically would be, but they have a class that they go to each week where the whole goal is to plan the social outings that are going to happen during the weekend. And so the students are the ones that come up with the ideas that are based on the interest in the group. And then the staff are just there to assist them with like planning out the logistics, what bus you're going to take, how much money, timing, all that kind of fun stuff.
Great. And really a buy-in on like what's happening, this is the activity that we want to do, and we're going to plan it. And then, as we were saying before, with the whole failing up thing, it's like, if it doesn't work out, because for whatever reason, why was that? What did we do? Did we not leave enough time? Did we not have enough money? Did we all those pieces of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And staff do attend 2 of those activities per weekend just to be there to help with that facilitation piece of things. But then the other ones, the students do independently. And also a lot of our classes that we offer too around leisure time are to get at this piece too. We try to offer like a really wide range of things, everything from chess clubs and book clubs to virtual games. Right now, our speech language pathologist is doing a take a break night. So it's like a later in the class day where they're playing games with each other. And so that's all happening, virtually right now. So that's been a really nice piece to keep that going. And our classes are small too. So, I mean, the intent behind everything we do is to facilitate those social connections and social interactions. But I think sometimes our adults really benefit from at least some exposure to some different things. You come in with some usually pretty staunch opinions about what you like to do, but sometimes, whenever you do get exposed to some new things, you learn, hey, like there is something else. We've also helped students connect with campus clubs at colleges where they're taking classes. And then even out in the community, I mean, Newton's so fantastic with all the different cultural resources that they have available. There's a comic store downtown that has like a meetup group that's been super popular. We've helped students hook up with hiking groups. And so yeah, that's definitely a robust piece because we want students to feel comfortable. There's that initiating word again, initiating and making and maintaining those plans when we're not there, when you're not living on our campus and there's a staff person to give you a nudge, you feel comfortable doing that. And I will say our grads, they're welcome to come back and join the activities that we host on the weekend. But by the time they graduate and move off campus, most of them really do have a nice little cluster of friends that they feel comfortable doing things with, and they do continue to do that.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic. John, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I know, I feel like, I could be wrong, I feel like you are drawing, because of where you are in the city and the nature of your program, I feel like you are drawing students from maybe the widest, geographic area. So I'm interested to hear how you create community and facilitate that social piece among your students, as well as, your internship program has been, is phenomenal and has been really successful with, some of your students, getting placed, and, how do all those pieces work together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna echo some similarities to what Lauren and Christy were saying. I think to touch on Lauren's point, the internships, when we're thinking about adulthood, right? Where do we spend the large majority of our time as adults, right? We spend it in the workplace.
Yeah.
And it's really going to be the longest, hopefully, ideally, right? It's the longest period of our lives also. Adolescence is really, when you think about it, kind of a blip on the radar, right? And then the rest of that time is spent being adults and learning how to build relationships in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And, I think now more than ever, knowing how to build appropriate relationships in the workplace and know boundaries and know all of that are things that we're doing a deep dive on right now, from HR policies to everything, to help students think about that. But also build friendships and building healthy work relationships is extremely important. We do enrichment programs for after hours and things like that. That's not our mainstay of socialization, though. I think it's more along the lines of helping our students find that urgency in their lives around what do they want from a relationship, and are they going to wait for that to come knocking on their door, or are they going to take action now, right? And within the focus program plays a really large role in that for us, again, with helping students build relationships, initiate, great word, right? It's so important. Right, do it, you have to do it. I'm not doing this for you. Mom and dad can't do it for you. If you want to hang out with somebody, whether it's just as friends, even romantically, whatever it might be, how are you going to go about that? And start breaking down the process with them, so it's really coming from them, right? And they start to share and reflect on the things that they want in their lives. And it goes back to even what we were talking about before. It's about positioning our students in a leadership role of their life, and who they are when they show up in our community is paramount to their success, right? We live in all these different communities in our lives, and it's either work, our neighborhoods, our little cluster of friends, wherever we, school, whatever it might be, and who they are in each one of those places is going to be different oftentimes, but helping them connect to that. And make sense of these different roles that they play in their lives. That's all part of socialization. It's really, people are complex. Our kids are really complex, and helping them figure out how to navigate, an already complex world is a big part of it.
You're right.
So again, it's very fluid and organic, but it's happening constantly.
It's true, and you're right about the focus, and and all of you, I think, are helping prepare your students for this long period of like adolescence is a blip. It is like a very short period of time. I mean, I'd say to my kids all the time, like, you couldn't pay me to do those years again. Like they were like, I mean, I'm not going to say horrific, but you couldn't pay me to do those years again. the years after that are so much better. And, in terms of like, just laying out the preparation and, and
30s, 40s and beyond, Christine. It's the best.
Exactly. 40s are the new 30s, and 50s soon are going to be the new 30s or whatever. No, that's super. And that's a great perspective to have. I'm going to ask one last question to wrap this up. And just because it wouldn't be 2021 if we didn't have a COVID question, how has your program been, I just got a 50 years, the new 20s. It absolutely is.
These are the new 20s.
Absolutely right. How has your program been affected by COVID? And when do you anticipate, moving back to kind of, more normal, more typical programming? Christy, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Yeah. So our residential programming has continued in person. So the biggest impact on it has been not being able to access the community as much as they typically do, just to keep the whole residential population there safe.
Yeah.
We have continued to have day students as well, but they haven't been coming on campus. So for them, it has been virtual. And then there have been some one-on-one staff meetups in their home community to help them continue to work on things in that capacity, and it not just be virtual. We are anticipating that this summer and into the fall, we'll be able to have day students returning in person.
Yeah.
Is the goal. Yeah. So we have had our full curriculum online throughout COVID, and that's really been a fantastic thing in that it's helped a lot of people who might not have otherwise accessed our programming have been able to take part, some a la carte, some closer to full time. And I do anticipate we probably will continue to have some type of virtual offering to continue to, meet the needs of that particular crowd. I think that's everything. Yeah.
I mean, COVID,
is like I have a little bit of COVID brain. So it could be.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, COVID is, like I said, we wouldn't be doing this, remotely, without it, the opportunities of, of this type of gathering, and access, obviously, didn't exist, before, 18 months ago. So, definitely there's a little bit of silver lining, mostly not, but, but a little bit of silver lining.
Lauren and I were at a panel discussion, I think a week before the shutdown in Stanford.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But like before that, you had to get a location, and then you have to get the panelists there, and you had to come from the city, and it took all this, whatever. And then, half the time the parents don't show up because it's too far and it's a Wednesday night. So, there's definitely, opportunity, like you said, with that piece of it, even if you're not accessing it all the time, or you're only doing it on a piecemeal basis. Mm-hmm. Lauren, why don't you talk a little bit about what's changed for your program since COVID, and when you think it'll go back to, to normal, quote unquote?
Great question. So I feel really fortunate that we've been in person since the fall. We are a small program, so that certainly helps. But we've been following the safety protocols. And I think it's when we are virtual and when we have been virtual, it's nice to have the conversations about, you didn't have your camera on, and, you didn't answer my question, or, having, because I think, we're rethinking online learning and the importance of engagement. And that's actually what really allowed us to kind of brainstorm on WCP Live and this whole online program, because we started getting inquiries. We had a family reach out to us in Colorado, and they were like, we'd love to come. And we're like, we're a day program, so then we started brainstorming even further, and it's like, well, why not help more students? So we've been really fortunate to launch this online program. And I think, I personally feel hopeful. I don't know how everyone else feels, but I'm feeling really hopeful in terms of our internships and in-person events. Yes, more folks do log in for our open houses online than they came to 2 years ago. But I also, so there's pros and cons, but I'm also looking forward to the normalcy and the importance of just being together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, the pivot last year was intense, as it was for everyone. And we were really fortunate. I mean, Winston, I think on the whole, did an incredible job preparing for the fall and throwing a tremendous amount of resources at every one of our campuses. So we're we're really set up for a really nice blended learning environment that so much of it will continue in various forms. You know, and we're also in the process of launching an online version of the program too. I think we're going to be hearing that a lot from different programs because there is a huge need across the country. And you know, I think we learned a lot about what we can do. Like Lauren said, I think we're learning how to do this technological piece really well. I'm going to give my team all the credit, really, in regards to what they were able to pull off. I think the biggest thing for us was the internship piece.
Yeah.
You know, we were really confident on how we handled, you know, the distance learning immediacy back in the spring, and felt that we were really good at keeping our, you know, our community going. And it was the internship piece that was really like, well, what are we going to do if we can't have kids in internships? So my internship team really quickly and incredibly well put together this wonderful band of relationships with new and existing internships, where all of our kids are in internships virtually, working with some wonderful organizations, not-for-profits, all different types of industries, and they're working and they're learning how to work like this. You know, so the other thing that we have to think about through this process is, you know, what will be normal when we get back.
Right.
You know, that's the other piece of it. You know, we're seeing a lot more people comfortable working online. Are bricks and mortar going to be as prevalent as they were prior to? Right now, it's not. What's the trend going to be? We don't know yet.
Yeah.
You know, people might want to get back into the offices, and a lot of people realize we can do this way and probably save a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
From, you know, for these businesses. So you know, again, whether it's fortunate or just by the sheer will of my team to make this happen, I feel fortunate that I had them working for our program and made it happen. And then building an incredible, you know, in the spring and over the summer, really putting together a phenomenal employability skill building program that they're delivering online and beautifully. And they're meeting with the students twice, well, 4 days a week for them, but students are meeting with the internship team twice a week for full days. And they're doing all these workshops throughout the, you know, the entire day of our program, which is 9 to 3:30. You know, so they're really in there with these kids one-on-one and in groups and doing all sorts of work with them in relationship to that. I mean, you know, so optimism is how I'm looking at it. I'm optimistic for the fall. We're doing we do pool testing weekly on campus for COVID. We've been, knock on wood, we've been extremely fortunate to date. We had about a quarter of our students in live, and we're starting to see more and more now that our team is, I think, probably 99% fully vaccinated at this point.
Yeah.
And our students are starting to get vaccinated. I mean, even prior to now lowering the age, my own sons are signed up for next week.
Mhm.
You know, but I think as we start to see more students getting vaccinated, and I think just starting to get a little bit more comfortable with the idea that COVID's not going away necessarily, and we have to try to figure out how we're going to live with this as part of the new normal.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'm going through this myself on, you know, what do we do? How do we start getting back out into the world and doing things, and, you know, without taking too many risks, but also living our lives. And you know, that's the hope for the fall, is that we're going to open up. That's the plan, you know, and if kids still need to be blended, they can. You know, maybe, as Christy said, anxiety is prevalent, you know, and that is, you know, at the heart of some of the reasons why kids aren't coming in, because they don't want to get on the subway, or they don't want to take the Metro North in, or, you know, whatever else it might be, you know. So optimistic.
Absolutely. Wonderful. That first party is going to be a weird one, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
That we all go to. Thank you guys so much for joining this evening, and for taking the time to share your wonderful programs with us. As I said, this recording will be available tomorrow or later this week. And I will make the slide presentation available to everyone who registered for the webinar. So that'll be coming soon. But thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great evening. Be well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.